Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here. Myself, I'm Lebanese, been in the Gulf, GCC, for over 30 years now, as much as I hate to admit it. It's been a great journey in the Gulf overall. Been in the marketing, commercial side of things, multiple industries, communication, businesses, multinationals that settled in. And the one thing, I guess, that's been common through those years, there's been fantastic years. There's been huge growth, huge changes. Everybody knows the stories of, Dubai as a city, the UAE in general, Saudi in general. And it's been a continuous change, continuous growth. So the markets clearly have the ability to absorb and to develop and generate more business. And myself, as part of a company that has been involved in launching lotteries over the world, really, I mean, some of our team members will tell you about how they launched the first lottery in Pakistan, good 15, 16 years ago, or in Moscow with, ex-KGB members, or in Peru, or in Korea. So we've been at it as at Keros for a while now, and the latest of that was our introduction to the UAE about 4 or 5 years ago of what was known as Emirates Lotto. And that eventually changed into another brand, and then we went on to launch another lottery, again in the UAE, called Emirates Draw. It's been really successful, and then I'm sure we'll be talking about it. So that's a little bit about my background.
When the first opportunity came up saying, you've been involved in these other markets along the way and starting lotteries and those types of things, what interested you in the Middle East? Obviously you had the background in there, but what was the impetus to say, now is the time that we can actually come into this market and enter this market in a meaningful way? Before, and then we'll get into the Emirates Draw of what you guys are actually doing, but how did that precursor to getting into the market, and when did the light bulb go off going, we've got the green light, let's figure out how to do this?
Yeah. These situations happen always due to a number of factors that take place. So when it was initially launched, it was COVID times. I think the market was in need of new things, new ways of doing things. And for some of the partners, there was a need to, what can we do for the society in these relatively troubling times? And lotteries traditionally around the world have been very physical. So the mindset then was, what can we do that is digital? And so that's where our focus has been primarily. At the same time, if you look at the macro environment, particularly within the UAE, within Saudi Arabia, as of 2016, 17, there's been a huge drive by those governments to open up, to become literally more tolerant. As a matter of fact, I think the Year of Tolerance was officially announced by the UAE, and they've gone through huge initiatives. The Pope has visited the country. We've launched a lot of initiatives in the UAE to be tolerant. As a matter of fact, in the coming 2 weeks, there is an exhibition of which we are sponsors in Abu Dhabi, which talks about civilizations and tolerance. So there is a big drive towards that. And so it was about the right time to get into these, into opening up the market for lottery. That, of course, on top of the obvious realization that that was a market that was still untapped for. Now, there are lotteries, and we'll maybe talk about some of the surrounding countries, and you may know that, is that there are lotteries in a few of the markets around us. There are even casinos. Lebanon has been traditionally known for it, but there are some in Egypt as well, in Morocco. So the scene around us was somewhat ready. The local need through launching innovation, COVID, and what we could do as a private enterprise to support the government in their initiatives. So,
let's fast forward a little bit, not really that much fast forward, but you start Emirates Lotto, that then transitioned into Emirates Draw over that. Talk about, because obviously I think most people from the outside are looking at going, a couple of questions. One, how the heck are you doing it where you're doing it? You know, and two, how is it's shaped differently than other groups, and we can go into how this is marketed and how you continually drive the product. But I think understanding first and foremost, how was this allowed to go forward, and then two, talk about your startup and into how things are going, you know, out of that starting gate.
Absolutely. So I think it was mentioned in the panel just before us. I think, one of the members was saying it's all about adaptability. You know, when you go into a market, you've got to adapt to it. And clearly, lotteries in the GCC, in our part of the world, has some contradictions. So the key for us was to adapt the product to be more palatable to the local authorities and population. And there's a few things that we did. Back at the time of Emirates Lotto, we formulated the purchasing process to match local ongoing practices. And so what are the local ongoing practices back then? They were mainly promotional, centered around raffles rather than draws. And for many people, the question will be, isn't that just the same thing? Not quite. So there are a few nuances that make a raffle more acceptable. And also by consulting with local authorities, we realized that one of the main conditions for it to be more acceptable was the purchase of a tangible, physical, usable product. So you find that whereas us or our competitors, you start the process by purchasing a product. In our case, at Emirates Draw now, it's a pencil. Some of our competitors are selling bottles of water. And that sale is done. So you have purchased a physical product, and then you are entered into a promotional raffle, where there are, that's the second distinction that we introduce, guaranteed prizes. The fact there are guaranteed prizes to a number of entries that are predetermined through a sequential number that the consumer has not selected, again puts it a little bit away from that quote-unquote gambling side of things. And then the third leg of that is the lottery draw as we know it, the balls, but that is then an optional, free of charge component. Now you might say, well, it comes back to the same thing. Yes, you know, so does, you know, Western banking as we know it and Islamic banking. They are equivalent theories in that the approach is different, but the result is similar. Yeah.
You know, I think one of the things we talked about this, you know, a few weeks ago when we started warming up for this panel and that sort of stuff. The marketing of this has been obviously very key, not just in its initial phase, but in driving it to where, you know, it became a thought and concept to a successful product, if you want to use those terms.
Yes.
And you talked about the purchase of a pencil and how that came into play. Talk about how, not just, I mean, and we've talked about it earlier today with marketing aspects and other things along the way, but it's very unique on how you have to, I'm going to use the term sell it, but how you market in that environment, knowing all those things about being it a draw and a raffle and distinguishing that in between. Talk about those things.
Sure. So a few things come to mind. Number one, the approach, the go-to-market approach, right? So many markets are mature in terms of lotteries and the offers that are there. But the UAE, you know, the GCC in general, surrounding countries, were not very familiar with that process. So our first choice was to keep it simple and introduce a product that people would take time to familiarize themselves with in order to understand how to go about, what the process, what's behind it, what does this product do, and then introduce new products. And I can say that over the past 2.5 years at Tikeros, we're looking after Emirates Draw as one of our brands. We've introduced 3 a total of 3 products. So we started with 1, and now we're at a portfolio of 3, with hopefully more to come. So that was the overall kind of approach in terms of starting simple and then add more choices, more options. Also to satisfy the needs of different stratas or different segments within the market, because different products appeal to different targets. The population in the UAE is growing, as it is in the Gulf in general. So we know that the potential is there, and we know that that's going to go perhaps exponentially even in the years to come. In terms of the product itself, you're talking about the pencil, yes. And if you look at most lotteries around the world, they would say play and win. In our case, we're sensitive in our approach to the language that is being used in the market. So you say buy and win. So that was already the first thing, is that yes, I am buying a physical, tangible product. Of course, the Gulf is full of expatriates, this huge number of them, whether from Asia or from other Arab countries, that are a little bit more familiar with lotteries from back home. But for these population, whether you said buy and win or whether play and win, it sort of came back to the same thing. But in terms of how we communicated it to the market, there were quite a few sensitivities that we wanted to cater for proactively in order not to be conflictive, if that's a word, that against the local feelings. So it was buy a product and play. It was have an opportunity rather than take a chance, be lucky. And then what we noticed is, first of all, there was an immediate acceptance. So the markets were ready in that mindset, so the timing was good. But we also noticed that as we progressed, people were getting more and more relaxed about the concept of taking part into a lottery activity, essentially, because they were also seeing the winners. The proof was in the pudding. So that sort of just widened up the door. And even in terms of the terminology, now you see some of the newer entrants, it's about, take a chance, be lucky. And I think that's great, because overall, we should be aiming, as the governments of the GCC are pushing us to be more tolerant, more accepting, more open to new concepts that could be mutually beneficial for everyone who is living, within their geographical area.
I think there's a couple things you want to hit on that I want to follow up on. Is I've been going over there now for a number of years, and have been following what you guys have been doing from a marketing standpoint, as well as from a CSR, a charitable component, and taking that into account as well. And I think, talk about how when you went into this market or others that you guys have gone into, looking at not only that cultural component that is very valuable in understanding what needs to happen, but also how to be and I hate the term CSR, I like using corporate citizenship as we talked about. It's not about an obligation, it's about what you want to do because it's who you are. So talk about the cultural component and as well as the giving back to the market in that same point in time.
All right. Yes. So, and I mentioned just now, governments in this part of the world, and I mean the GCC, have been very high on sustainability, on environment. Is one of their priority agendas. I don't think there are many countries around the world that has, for example, a ministry of tolerance. So the focus is really high on those matters. And lotteries in general, in fairness to everyone, have always contributed back to the society. Whether it's the UK National Lottery or California Lottery, all of them have had huge contribution. And over the years, these contributions have gone into the billions of dollars, be it for education, be it for homeless people, be it a variety of causes. What happened in our specific case for in the UAE was that the expertise we had in terms of launching lotteries around the world met with local desires to launch local programs that were related to marine sustainability and planting corals. And And if you go back and research it in the press, you will find the Minister of Environment in the UAE saying, we would like to launch programs of coral reforestation. And some of our partners, through their contacts, were already in touch with a group of people that had ideated this thing of, let us on a benevolent, voluntary basis, plant corals. So these things came together at the right time, and we said, okay, why don't we as an organization, as a lottery, who has more means and is able to give back to the society, do it? And the strategic choice that we had back then was to, as opposed to helping a variety of associations, of course we do, but the bulk of our effort has been dedicated to our coral reef restoration program. And so we took this nucleus of local talent, Emiratis, many of whom were fishermen from father to son to son. And they had the empirical knowledge of what was happening in their local environment. And we said, you know what, we will support you. And the minute we started supporting them, of course, then they had the means to dedicate more time, more support, and invite their friends and families around. So we have a mini army of volunteers that go out regularly, plant corals. We report on them, of course, regularly on some of our videos. And it's incredible to see that most of these are Emiratis themselves, which initially we thought they were going to be expats because, you know, swimming, diving has always been a bit of an expat occupation. But the appetite of the local population, of the Emiratis towards it, is fabulous. There is, of course, a wider effect of looking after corals, which is the number of fish that are residing in these areas. So it has a knock-on effect on fishing, on scuba diving, on tourism in general, and obviously on hotels. Now, we are only 2.5 years old, I might say, so that is amplifying. And then now, of course, the UAE is coming to a sort of step 2 in its development, and I'm sure you'd want to talk about it. So maybe it's time we get into that. But we hope that going forward, we are able to continue and widen this economic ripple that is now impacting more and more parts of our society.
Obviously, there's been some changes in the last 6 months as it relates to a little bit longer than that. Looking at that, maybe let's talk about what has happened to date and where's this journey going as it relates to the future of Emirates Straw on the market and those types of things.
Right, yes, absolutely. So as I said, since 4 or 5 years ago, the Tikeiros team has kick-started this whole process through Emirates Lotto, now Emirates Straw. And that has created ripples through the society. Of course, we popped up on the radar of many people, commercial but also governmental. And so seeing the market acceptance, they said, okay, let's try and regulate this. And that's a fantastic thing. That's something we, of course, support 100%. And we're talking about consumer safety earlier. And for sure, these are things that are badly needed. And so it seems that they had started their groundwork a year or 2 years ago in order to prepare to the phase that kick-started about 6 months ago, and it kind of became a bit more public when everybody heard of the GCGRA. And so we've been having contacts with them for a good 6 months now. And the idea in everything we see from them is clearly geared towards more transparency, having the right standards, and in that, I think because our team is experienced from all over the world, we were already able to bring in quite a lot of the best practices from around the world, which was also part of the reason why we thrived. Number one, so they are very high on that, and of course that is very important because as you bring more oversight and best practices, you gain customer credibility, acceptance, and usage. So that's important for everybody, whereas us, all the other players, it's obviously something that we welcome a lot. The second thing that they focus on is obviously consumer protection. You win, you need to get your winnings, and so all that is, I think they'll be looking at that. And of course, they are interested in the whole commercial side of it because as a government, you want to make sure that those activities have a return back onto the society, whether it's the CSR component or the commercial component, because that's what the government does in order to provide for a better environment.
So the GCGRE was formed middle of last year, roughly, give or take a little bit. Maybe highlight a little bit as far as the process that they've gone through to try to bring that regulation to the forefront and where things are headed down the way here in the coming months and sort of the future of where you think the market is headed.
Sure. So, like I said, they've been working at it for quite a while. They've come into the market, if I remember correctly, as early as October of last year, where they signified their presence and they connected with all the big players, and they said, like, we, as of January 2024, we would like to slow the market down, and we would like you to pause your activities, whilst in parallel applying to become the national lottery operator. They have issued a set of bylaws, which few limited eyes have had the opportunity to see them, and we are sure that at some point in time there will be laws that will be gazetted, for everyone's sort of reading and clarification. That said, we are now, since that initial contact of October, bit of discussion, preparation, we have gone through a RFI, so a request for information phase, where we have submitted applications, us and other players, and they are now in that evaluation process, which will come out soon. And that's your next question. When? Yes. So we don't know when. They have not announced a clear date for it. Through contacts in the grapevines, we understand it will be somewhere in March, but that is speculative again. Yeah.
I know we're running out of time here. One of the last questions that somebody had here that I think is, knowing the experiences I've had there, knowing the experiences you've had over there. One is somebody said, how do you deal with the ever-changing politics of the region? And I think it's important just to highlight off of that is what's going on, as you talked about in the UAE and even in KSA and those types of things, does not necessarily reflect the larger global region that people associate with it. So, as you look at the future off of this, do you see the politics of the larger region play in, or is this much more localized to what's going on in the UAE and its desire to be a leader in that region and an example for the rest of us to follow?
I'll talk about an example. I don't know if you've heard of it. About a week or two ago, there was a store that has opened in the middle of Riyadh, in the diplomatic area of Riyadh, where that store now sells a product that has been prohibited. And I use the word prohibited because it links to what the product is, since 1952, if I remember the date right. So clearly, the GCC is heading towards openness, towards diversity, towards sustainability, and we see this trend growing. However, and that's something I guess Darwin mentioned, is the survival of who adapts better. So one needs to be nimble, one needs to have the local knowledge, and we feel we do. And so we're looking forward to an amazing decade, if not more, multiple decades in this part of the world.
Very good. Thank you for your time this morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give Paul a round of applause.
Thank you.